each play looks at a different aspect of addiction, different people it could impact, so we have one that's very centered around, group of high school friends, we have one that's centered around a family, of 4. So we're looking at these different, how does it impact my community? How does it impact my friends? How does it impact my family?
Someone that she had worked with was a nurse at the hospital, had stigma around people with substance use disorder. And after she saw the play, she went back to this woman and she said, my perspective has completely changed because of seeing this show. And it was so wonderful to hear that.
That in Washington County, Ohio, where we are, there is very much this dichotomy and dissonance between the reality of what's happening and the way that people want to view or accept what is happening, particularly when it comes to young kids.
I think what is so powerful about our shows is that in each performance, one of the characters is getting help, right? And on that path to recovery. So we are ending with the note of hope.
We have a really special one today. We have the cast of Improbable Players, which is a group out of multiple cities with people in recovery performing on addiction and understanding addiction a little bit better and finding your recovery. So we're really excited to, number one, talk about it, but then also bring you to a special surprise that we will have that you will find out later in the episode. So stay tuned.
So I'm Karen Snyder. I'm the Ohio Regional Director for our Cleveland chapter, and we travel all throughout Ohio to perform.
Yeah, I'm Ami Cazell. While I started in the Boston troupe many years back, now that I live in the New York area, I help direct the New York troupe of actors.
Hi, I'm Ryan. I'm here in Boston. I'm an actor, and I also help with training and program managing.
I'm Alexa, and I'm an actress for the Cleveland area.
So I wanted to start with your name, Improbable Players, and I think that's a good lead in to kind of understand how you guys came about, but I love the name Improbable Players. Can someone speak to the origins of that name and how it connects to everything you guys do?
We call ourselves Improbable because it's very unlikely we would be here given where we were not that long ago. Everyone in the company has had trouble with alcohol and drug addiction, and we are now in long-term recovery. We let them know that.
Awesome.
Congrats, everybody.
How did this start? How did the idea of, was this kind of the idea of I've recovered and now I want to really help others in this way? Or is this a way for people to kind of find recovery?
Yeah, were you creative people before you got into recovery and it was everybody just kind of had the same synergy of I want to be around like-minded thespians who are doing things? Because restaurant work, for example, super dangerous when you're in recovery. And I don't know about showbiz. Haven't heard rave reviews about the sobriety aspect of that.
So I can share, how our organization got started. A woman who was sober and in recovery for about 2 years, Lynn Bratley, she's the founder of Improbable Players. She started the organization in Boston in 1984. And she, having a theater background herself and being in recovery, she was the one that came up with the idea of bringing our stories to light on the stage. I myself was a theater major in college, so it's interesting that you share about the restaurant and industry. I think you can pretty much say for many different professions that they are soaked in addiction. But I definitely myself, growing up being on stage, I did all of my performing when I was drinking. One of the other actors who's been with the company the longest, her name is Chris Everett. She actually invited me to perform. I lived in Boston. That's where I got sober. And I was very hesitant. And I actually said no for a while because, I hated myself when I was drinking. And, part of theater, being a character, getting outside of myself, I really was drawn towards that. So being sober, and now I'm, supposed to love myself, and I was really struggling with that. But the way Chris shared about this organization, I took a chance, and I'm so grateful that I did, because even though some of the characters that we portray, I didn't necessarily do the same things that the characters did, I felt the same way. And so I'm sure that Ami and Ryan feel the same way. There's bringing that authenticity to the character because we've gone through those feelings, is a whole other realm.
What is that experience like? So a lot of times, sometimes we spend so much time trying to avoid things that bring up our demons or the things that maybe draw us into addiction in the first place. And now you're really facing it head on, so to speak, with, I'm going to really get into something that going back into any activity that you participated in regularly in active addiction is really hard when you get into recovery. And typically, so for example, here in good old Ohio, a lot of times it's playing cornhole or being at a barbecue. Those are scary things to do when you're in recovery, because you did them a lot when you were drinking and in active addiction and everything else. So it is possible to go back to things that you love to do in recovery. You just have to be, I think, really mindful about it. And what I think is interesting about the theatrical approach that Improbable Players has to this is not only are you engaging in theater, which requires a pretty intense connection with your own emotional experience and expression of those emotions, that's a really major feat for people in recovery to feel comfortable experiencing that much emotion. And so that would be interesting to hear from you guys about how did you manage to have this emotional connection with the stories that you were portraying? How did that balance against your recovery? Do you find it difficult? Is it rewarding? Because that's something that I'm interested in hearing more about.
I was going to say, historically, we say actors should be sober for at least a year before working with us. So that gives people some time to do their own inner work. Before getting on stage and acting out these stories, which can be really triggering. I mean, I remember, sometimes in the past when my sobriety might have felt a little precarious, and then playing drunk on stage kind of triggered some things. So it's also really important for us to all continue to maintain our recovery and continue to do our own work. And then there's the element of playing a character versus playing something that's really close to home. That's so interesting. And like Karen was saying, sometimes we think we want to be actors to get outside of ourselves and to be somebody else. But really, the more you dig into this work, it's getting in touch with your own true self and then being able to bring different facets of that self to the stage.
What do you guys, this whole idea of recovery theater is so different and outside the box. Can you guys talk about benefits or positives that you've seen in your recovery communities and your respective recovery communities, if any, related to the work that you guys do?
Sure. Yeah. One of the most rewarding aspects is you do from time to time get that firsthand feedback from a student, or maybe it's even a parent or something like that. But usually a student after the show, at the end of our performances, we always do these Q&A portions, which are, I think most actors will agree, the best part of the show. So we'll get questions from, middle schoolers, high schoolers. But after that, oftentimes you do have students coming up to you and, telling you hey, what you described, your life, that sounds like me right now. It's crazy to hear I'm not alone in this, so you're able to offer, that really in-depth help. And definitely, I know it's had an impact on students out there.
It tends to kind of normalize things for people. The idea that this isn't some foreign thing that people are experiencing, that a lot of us are going through that and struggling with similar things and similar emotional struggles, and then that helps people feel maybe safer to reach out and engage. Has that been your experience?
Yeah, it was a different angle on the question about how it assists our own like recovery community. And I was just going to say, like, being part of the New York troupe, where most of the actors who work with us are, people trying to be professional actors in New York and at varying levels of success. And like, that is that causes such a whirlwind of emotions and, constantly dealing with rejection and hopes smashed and then things, good things happening, but having like a community of actors in recovery to talk about those things with, where you have similar language to work through some of that stuff, that's been super helpful and inspiring for me.
It'd be such a specifically difficult thing to do in recovery is to try to be making money as a working actor, because there is so much rejection and so much feedback about yourself as a person and how you emote and how you do or don't connect. Like, that would be a very intense, specific experience for somebody to have in recovery. And so it's so interesting that you guys have been able to create these little like microcosms in your communities of people to support people going through that.
Yeah. And I mean, that's actually one of the reasons why I started the Cleveland chapter about 2.5 years ago, is because I had the experience of performing with Boston when I lived there. And then when I moved back to Ohio over like 4.5 years ago, I'm originally from Ohio. I knew that Ohio needed this level of prevention, and it's also recovery. So we're sharing the message of prevention with youth and, even treatment centers and hospitals. So, I mean, sometimes we're performing for detoxes. And so people who are in the midst of it, we're able to share about our recovery and give them that hope moving forward. And that, like, this is something that you can do, once you get a year clean and sober, is great to share with people.
I would say our main goal is to let people know that there is support out there for them. Whether they themselves are having a problem with substance use disorder, or if it is a loved one, family member, friend that is having trouble with substance use disorder, those people need support as well. So I would say our main overarching goal is to let them know that the support and resources are out there, that they're not alone in this.
I love that. I feel like in general with substance use disorder, I feel like we're still at a place where we're trying to reduce stigma and increase awareness about the disease itself. And anytime anybody's main goal, main mission is to shine light on the solution on the other side, not the episode of intervention where they spend 53 minutes talking about the problem and then you get a 30-second snippet at the end, 6 weeks after the fact, like kind of reversing those ratios. Like, yes, I'm qualified to do this because XYZ, but like, let me tell you how I've managed to keep myself in long-term recovery. Those Q&A panels at the end, I'm sure, have a lot to do bringing the solution to the table.
Do you get a lot of family engagement in those Q&As? Do they, like, people that, like, you're connecting a lot with those families as much as maybe connecting with those that are personally struggling?
So depending on the shows that we do sometimes for schools, we'll do performances for the schools during the day. And then in the evening, we'll do a community show. And so a lot of times parents will come to those shows because their kid says, hey, this is what I saw today, and I want you to, be a part of this. And then we also sometimes will do community shows with other organizations like behavioral health providers like yourself, which we will be doing a show coming up in June. And then also something during the pandemic, because we've had to switch everything to the virtual platform, we've done a number of shows for libraries, which they've been able to put out to the community. And that's a great way to really spread our message wide.
Have you had, is there been a community openness to this? Has there been any struggle in trying to bring this type of performance or issue or topic to light? Have you had success? I mean, maybe some of it has probably, like the Boston program and New York program's been well established, but like in terms of getting things started and going, was there struggles in that area?
That's a good question. For Cleveland, we actually did get some feedback recently from a youth development committee that, we didn't have many people attend for the community show, and our contact there kind of went back to the community and said, okay, we want to know like why people didn't attend. And partly it's because they had a certain idea of what our play was going to be about. The thing that I know Ryan and Alexa and Ami will attest to is that, it's great. I mean, obviously we want to share and promote about our organization, but you really don't fully get the grasp of it until you see a performance. And you're, again, post-COVID times, like you're in an auditorium of 800 middle schoolers and it's completely silent because they are so engaged with what is happening on stage.
Yeah, I don't know if there's been pushback or unwelcomeness for the shows, but I do know that a lot of times our contacts at schools are in the counseling department. And when we get there and when we're talking to people, that the counselors will say like, this is a really big problem in the community, but nobody wants to talk about it because it's so taboo, or like the parents don't realize what the kids are doing on the weekends. And so there's different levels of acceptance or denial in the community.
I wonder if there's like a community-wide like realization going, oh, well, our problem's a lot bigger than I wanted to attend to.
I would make the assertion that in Washington County, Ohio, where we are, there is very much this like dichotomy and dissonance between the reality of what's happening and the way that people want to view or accept what is happening, particularly when it comes to young kids. The idea that to go in and provide substance abuse prevention to like middle schoolers is going to create drug problems. They've already started experimenting with alcohol and sometimes even illegal substances in middle schools. Our community at large still, I think, has trouble accepting the reality of that and what that it's almost like it puts a judgment or a morality issue on the community, but it's developmentally appropriate for teens to experiment with substances. Nobody likes to hear that, but I say it every opportunity I can. Some people fall into addiction. We need to have treatment and prevention available across all spectrums, and DARE wasn't particularly effective, at least for me and my community. And so to have other options like you guys coming into schools and providing a different way to talk about this, I think is awesome.
So I'm curious in terms of the actors, the people involved, you guys in your program, is there a variety of people that have a theater background or people that are making a leap into something that is maybe completely foreign to them, and what that experience might be like for each of them? So someone who has a theater background might have a different experience going into that than someone who is not now taking a risk to do something that is very scary probably for some people, and certainly could bring up the pressures of your sobriety in that respect as well.
I would say most of our actors certainly do have some theater experience, not all. We have, musicians in the group. We have people that are more on the director, filmmaking side. But we also have we have a new actress in Boston just this year who is 18. She doesn't have theater background. She's taken like one drama class and then she did some plays in like third grade. So as long as you can, as long as you got that recovery background, some sobriety time, and then you do well in an audition. And we think you can handle being on stage, then you're in. We don't discriminate necessarily based on a resume or anything like that.
What does the rejection process look like? If you just said the word audition, so to me that means that like there is a possibility that somebody could show up and like, I would like to be a part of this, and you guys are like, well, you're not particularly gifted at, you know, acting. Like if I showed up, I would bomb that audition.
Oh,
so, so like, how does that work? Like, is there the opportunity to kind of not make the team? Does everybody kind of get to be a part of? How does that work?
Well, I haven't had to turn anybody away yet because we've needed people so badly that when we happen to find the right people, or a lot of times it's word of mouth. But I do feel like when working with the Boston troupe, sometimes somebody wasn't a great fit, but we would maybe communicate like, not at this time, but maybe in the future. And I think we had some like open rehearsal opportunities where people could come and rehearse alongside the troupe to kind of get a feel of what it was like and get to play and then build some skills along the way.
Yeah, for Cleveland, just going back to your previous question, like I would say more than half of the Cleveland troupe has not had theater experience. What Ryan was referring to, like if they feel comfortable on stage, you know, and they want to do this work, like, you know, that's where directors come in to share with them the process. But Alexa, do you want to share your background?
Yeah. So with that, I had like done theater in like high school when I auditioned. And then I auditioned for the Improbable Players because I was like, oh, it'll be something, you know, new to try. And I just kind of went with it. I got in and realized, you know, the feeling of being on stage is like so great for my sobriety. Like since then I was in 2 independent films. I do stand-up comedy. I have like a show in Kentucky and West Virginia this weekend.
Oh, you are so brave to do stand-up comedy. I could never. My self-esteem couldn't handle it.
But yeah, it really helped with my sobriety personally, being with the Improbable Players, especially during the pandemic.
Oh yeah.
So what is it like? Can you put your finger on one thing or something like specific about what about that experience makes it so helpful, or that you've really drawn from to you know enhance your recovery, improve your recovery, or you know get you on the right path?
Yeah, I would probably say just finding something I'm passionate about, because I mean I'd been like a chronic relapser before, you know, and I always like went back to drugs because I wanted to find like meaning, you know, in life. Meaning I would find it in like, you know, in a relationship, you know, which is never good in early recovery, but I would like constantly do that. And then I was like, oh, performing, you know, writing, you know, doing these different things, that gave me that feeling of meaning that I felt like I had always been lacking.
And I feel like purpose is so important to find in recovery. Though, if you have purpose, if you have meaning, you can get through bad days because you know that like better days are going to come. I have the ability to be patient with my bad days because I know that I have like a North Star to lead me to my next good day. Maybe I need to be patient for the day and it will come tomorrow. And that's something that we talk with our clients about all the time. Like there's a difference between a job and a career. There's a difference between a hobby and a passion. Like any time that you find something that can help you elevate those experiences up to the next level of experience, take a chance, see if it fits. And it seems like it really did for you, Alexa, which is awesome.
So how do you guys recruit? Like how do people figure out, oh, this is something that might be good for me? And I'm curious, with the pandemic, have you pivoted a little bit to allow people from not around that area to engage in this process, or is it still localized?
Part of it is word of mouth through the recovery community, how we've gotten some actors to audition. And then the other part is posting auditions online to different arts communities or like casting sites, and just making it really clear that you need to be clean and sober from alcohol and other drugs. And I think that one thing that I'll say, going back to, you know, whether we take people, you know, what the process is for audition, if someone says that they're clean and sober, and then when we audition them, they share that they're actually taking other substances, you know, we say, okay, you know, for our troupe, we are, you know, wanting someone who's abstinence from mind and mood altering substances. So that's something, you know, that we need to reiterate.
I wanted to share that I've found the casting call when I first joined back in 2007 on a Craigslist ad. Like, whoa, I can't believe this company actually exists. And I found it on Craigslist. I felt like I struck gold. But now when I'm looking for people, sometimes I'll use a site called Actors Access, which if you're an actor, you know what this is. And it was amazing how many responses I got for people who were interested in working with us. But like Karen said, like a lot of people weren't actually completely sober, or maybe they didn't really understand the language that I use, like talking about if you're sober or what that means. But how many people maybe still shared like they had a family member who had a problem, so they were interested in our work, or had some type of still wanting to be engaged with us.
And I imagine there's other possibilities to be engaged besides the performance aspect of it. And I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of auxiliary support that
like, can you be in like
required.
the band or like build sets if you're like that family member that just like wants to help out?
Well, we don't have a band, so that would be a no.
Yes, improbable
like,
musical players.
Yeah,
we got.
Like, I will have an orchestra.
There are definitely opportunities for volunteers, interns, board members. There are many, many ways to help out with our organization.
It's just fundamental to the organization that the players on stage are people who have lived experience and are in long-term recovery.
Correct.
I was thinking themes of what you guys cover in your performances. Like, what are some of the major themes that you try to accomplish through your performances?
Yeah, because right now you guys have 3 plays.
We have 3 plays for Zoom.
Yes.
In normal times, we have 3 more. So that makes it about 6, yes, or 5, because 1 is adapted for Zoom. Yeah, in terms of themes, so yeah, certainly that, how to find support, knowing you're not alone, that reducing the stigma theme as well is huge. And then we, each play looks at a different aspect of addiction, different people it could impact, so we have one that's very centered around a group of high school friends. We have one that's centered around a group of a family, of 4. So we're looking at these different, how does it impact my community? How does it impact my friends? How does it impact my family? Different aspects that might occur in each of those. Is there peer pressure involved? Is there a substance use amongst your family members and things like that? So I think we cover a lot based on the various plays.
Seems like each play is just exploring a different dynamic that addiction may disrupt or cause problems in. And I mean, the themes of addiction and recovery are somewhat consistent across people's experience. Everybody's experience is unique, but the disease itself is pretty typical. Tends to run generally a similar course for people and create similar problems. But it seems like the dynamics that you're exploring in the context of those things are different depending on the play, because of course the audience is different. What's your favorite play to do? We're not supposed to have favorites, but everybody always has a favorite. Like, what's everybody's personal favorite play right now? Out of those, let's go with all 5.
Yeah, let's just pretend that we were doing in person.
Let's pretend like it's not COVID. Let's pretend like everything's normal, everything's fine here. What's everybody's favorite play?
Mine is actually one of our newest plays. It's called Smoke and Mirrors. It is a 2-person play. It is, I think, hilarious, and it looks at many different little aspects. It's kind of a collection of short scenes. And one of the major ones that we did get a lot of requests for over the years was this problem of vaping. So that more than any of our other shows explores vaping and its side effects as well. I
bet you schools request that a lot. Do schools request that a lot? Because I know we get a lot of requests to how do we help with vaping, because it's prevalent everywhere.
So I'll never do that. Was and still is my favorite, even though I'm not performing anymore. It's such a powerful show to watch. And then when I performed, a very powerful show to be a part of, because a lot of the scenes have this really heightened, tense energy. And that particular play is actually based around the life of our founder, Lynn Bradley. So it's about her alcoholism and how it affected each member of her family. It shows how her husband, was in denial, didn't want to deal with it. It showed how the daughter was trying to get the mom help, trying to fix the family, really be the caretaker, and then how the son starts to drink and use drugs.
So you're saying there's a lot of crying that's going to happen.
Yeah.
People are going to be crying.
I should bring my tissues.
We should bring our tissues. And
yeah, when we do it for the community, I would say there are a number of adults that do cry.
Addiction is it's an individual experience, but there are these like huge unifying themes that everybody experiences in different ways. So, I mean, even that like loneliness, isolation, denial of somebody's issues out of the husband, physical health issues, mental health issues. I'm unhappy in my career. Let me just put that in a box and lock it away. Like people do that. That's an experience that a human has. So, Ami, what's your fave?
We have a play called End of the Line, as long as I'm not getting this confused with another one. But it was written because we interviewed a series of people and then wrote like mini segments based on these interviews. I wasn't actually part of this process, unfortunately, but that's how the show was developed. So a lot of it is like kind of verbatim stuff that was taken from real people's stories and interviews. And then it was crafted into this. There's drama scenes and there's a lot of comedy and there's like some SNL elements, and it's really fun for actors to perform because we're very active and changing characters constantly. But each person's story is, it gives you these four different unique stories of people coming to the end of the line and how they eventually realize that they need help. And it's pretty powerful.
So are some of your, are they all totally scripted? Is there any improv in some of the work that you guys do?
Right now, they're all totally scripted, aren't they? Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. The improv really comes in the Q&A. Yeah.
Well, Ryan sometimes does some.
Right.
Some actors, I suppose, are more comfortable improvising than others. And, I'm always open to and excited when people kind of throw in things that are a little off script. And then, sometimes we actually kind of got to update our jokes and things like that for the times, for the popular meme.
You got
to make it.
Comedy typically doesn't age well.
Yeah.
Exactly. And high schoolers, their heads will flip, if they hear you just say something that's only been popular for a week, what?
Yeah, you have to trick the youth into listening. Yes.
Yeah, they change a little bit here and there.
Yeah. Alexa, which one is your favorite right now?
If I remember the name correctly, because this is one of the ones we don't do online anymore. I think it's Running on E. It's about like four group of friends, and the one girl starts using drugs. It starts drinking. It's the normal, progression, and then eventually, figures out how to ask for help. There's like one scene in there that I particularly like. She's using much drugs with her friend Brendan. And then like when she's like has her like kind of breakthrough moment, he's like, "You're disgusting," blah, blah, blah. And I felt like it was therapeutic because that was very similar to how I got sober. I was dating a drug dealer. And then, at some point he was like, "You're not the nice girl I thought you were." It was a lot more yelling than that. And I was just like, I don't think anyone's that nice on that much meth. So
I love that you guys, just from hearing you talk about things like Ryan, you were talking about yours, and me talking about yours, like the use of humor in this. And I think that like humor and laughter and levity and brightness is something that people don't typically associate with recovery or addiction. I remember when I was running IOP groups, there would be times where we would just be like losing it with laughter. And when everybody had like, gathered themselves back together, be like, "Oh my gosh, if anybody heard what we were laughing about right now, everyone would think we needed to like go to the nut house, because these aren't things you're allowed to laugh about or allowed to let yourself have a good time about." And I think it's so important that you guys are incorporating that element into the work that you're doing. Like, you're allowed to laugh again. You're allowed to have a good time. You're allowed to have done maybe some really bad things in the past that you're not really proud of, but like redemption is possible. Change is possible. You can be a whole human when you come into recovery. You don't always have to talk about it like the first 53 minutes of intervention. Dark and gloomy, scary.
To your point of creating that lightness, I think what is so powerful about our shows is that in each performance, one of the characters is getting help, right? And on that path to recovery. So we are ending with the note of hope.
Do you get engagement after the fact of performances?
Yeah, like after Q&As afterwards.
Like even beyond like checking in the next day or, you know, in some fashion connecting afterwards, even if they're not wanting to be actors?
For schools, we provide feedback forms. So for both the faculty and the students, we have that information. And then we always check back in about 6 months after each performance to see if they're interested in us coming back again. And so that's what, you know, most of the schools and organizations and in all 3 of our states, they're schools that have had us year after year after year, which is, you know, great because we build relationships over time.
Like one of the things that would hold me back from doing something like this, other than my terrible acting skills, is she would have to improv. You would have to. I can only improv. I can only improv. One of the things that would hold me back was to make yourself public, to be recovering out loud is still something that I think is really, it's really misunderstood territory, and it's kind of new territory to be doing, and to be recovering loudly in a smaller community. It's almost more pressure, and it's a lot. It could be kind of daunting, and the way that people talk about recovery and what it's supposed to be, it's almost like this little porcelain egg, this thing that like, oh, don't let anybody come close to it. Don't rock the boat. Don't go into any storms, anything that could cause disruption, because this precious little porcelain egg is just so delicate, so fragile. But that shouldn't always be the case. Yes, at some point, your recovery is that fragile little porcelain egg, but over time, you can withstand some pushback. You can withstand some rejection. You can, for better or worse, like let people see you recovering out loud, but it is a lot of pressure. So have any of you guys or any of the other actors that you work with ever had to deal with the pressure of recovering loudly through this work? I see all of you. I see all of you thinking. You're all like, how am I going to answer this question?
It's a loaded question.
Appropriately. With all of the rules and everything about recovering loudly.
I often tell students, you know, at shows or students I might be working with in a workshop that it actually got so much easier for me the moment I said out loud, you know, I'm an alcoholic or I have a substance use disorder. There's this big burden that was just lifted off my shoulder. You know, you have to hide. I can ask for help now. And yeah, it's scary, and you know, because it takes some bravery for sure. But yeah, I tend to just tell people it's simple. You know, it's easy. Life gets actually way easier once you get over that. Once you start asking for help, once you admit it. You know, it is that first step of the 12-step program. You know, just admitting you have a problem. So
yeah, and I feel like the tools of recovery give you ways to live more fully in that. And so on stage, like telling my story and being real on stage in front of a bunch of kids that I don't know, I haven't really had a problem with it. But then if I think about recovering out loud in terms of like on social media or something, that's where I get more like uncomfortable and hesitant. So that's just interesting to think about too, as things go more online, and like who could tune into this performance and see me here. And then, you know, I'll be really...
It's probably a little bit more comforting to live out loud in a structured way. So by performing in this play, it's a little bit more structured. It's it's somewhat of a controlled setting than talking about it online on social media, where you have no idea what's going to happen when you do that. So I would imagine that plays a huge role.
Well, and like the pressure of people knowing that you're in recovery, and then them kind of looking to you as like, oh, well, this is the person that I go to ask my questions. And there's a few people in our community, one of whom works for our agency as a peer recovery supporter, who her personal recovery journey has been very public because she wanted it to be that way. And so just at all hours of the day and night and in between, she's, you know, getting messages and hooking people up with treatment. And I could see a lot of people maybe not wanting to do something so brave because like, oh my gosh, I don't want people to think that I know what I'm doing, or that's too much pressure. I'm not here to get people into recovery. I want to be around sober people, and I want to like act on this passion of telling stories on stage as a character. I didn't know if you guys had experience either yourselves or with people in your troops that struggled in any way, shape, or form, because every community is different. Maybe ours is just outrageously pressurized.
I do know that I struggled going on stage and saying out loud that I was an alcoholic, but I also was what I term an earlier recovery within the first few years. Mm-hmm. And for me, I still was learning about myself and about my recovery, and that it's not a bad thing to share this. I think as an alcoholic, I had stigma even around my own disease.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because like Ryan, when you were sharing, like it's so powerful, and that weight really gets lifted when you are able to self-identify. The terms alcoholic and addict, those are self-given. Like as a therapist, I don't diagnose you as being an alcoholic or addict. I diagnose you with a substance use disorder out of the DSM. I don't get to put a label of alcoholic or addict onto somebody. That's something that only that person can give to themselves. And so standing up and saying that out loud, that weight being lifted, there's a huge stigma around that. And then Karen, to what you were just saying, I do think there is even that. So you get over the first level of stigma of figuring out how to get yourself into recovery. And then there's a second level or layer of stigma. If you want to talk about what it means to be in recovery for you, it's another kind of hurdle to jump, I think, that I've observed with people that I've worked with.
So I'm curious to kind of build off of this in terms of stigma, because I think a big effort that we are trying to accomplish is reducing stigma, normalizing things, helping people feel comfortable. And so I would imagine that in terms of the audience and the people that you present to, there's a faction of people that are like silently, craving an opportunity to get help. Mm-hmm. But are not saying anything. But then there's probably some faction that's like really big on the stigma. Like, addicts are not worth it. They're choosing to be this way and doing all this ways. And I'm curious if you guys can speak on an experience maybe where you happen to find a person like that in the audience, and if you have an impact story where the stigma shifted or reduced as a result of seeing this. Because I would imagine, like, one of the things that I think is probably most powerful about this is I can't necessarily know what your experience is like, but you're giving me an experience that I can be a witness to, mm-hmm. so that I can at least somewhat have some element of understanding that would help me have more compassion in doing that. And so I think, from the outsides, when we say, druggies with needles in the arms, mm-hmm, or, driving and doing all these different things, we have these, views that are not really very well informed, but I would imagine there's a different experience after watching one of your performances.
Yeah, I'll just share really quickly. I actually went to an in-person networking event today, which, by the way, I wore a mask, but it was very nice to see people in person. And one woman that I was speaking with, she had seen a performance that we had done about a year and a half ago at Southwest General Hospital. She had shared with me that someone that she had worked with was a nurse at the hospital, had stigma around people with substance use disorder. And after she saw the play, she went back to this woman and she said, my perspective has completely changed because of seeing this show. And it was so wonderful to hear that.
I would imagine, because I think you just have well, that's why I'm so excited about the performance that you guys are going to do virtually, in our community and probably beyond, but not just find ones that maybe are, thinking about recovery or whatever, but people that don't really understand addiction.
And I think that's how our plays are written, to present those different viewpoints, so that no matter who's watching, they can find themselves in one of the characters and identify. So even if it's a person who's has stigma, and, you know, come to identify and recognize it in yourself through watching a performance.
Okay. So I want to end on this. And so I think we're going to be, you guys are going to be performing
June 3rd.
June 3rd. But what's the play that we picked? I'll Never Do That. Is that the one?
I'll Never Do That. Yes.
Never Do That. So for those that are watching and starting to get really intrigued and interested, what is one thing that they should expect, or one thing that they can really be excited about in terms of what they'll get from this performance?
There's definitely variety. This play uses masks. Not only are you seeing theater, but you're seeing different types of theater as well.
I think people are going to be surprised at how engaging a virtual performance can be. I know that many people, I mean, myself included, you know, many of us are on the computers, you know, all day and all night. And it's like, okay, another virtual performance, but and I mean, I've seen many of our virtual performances. It's incredibly engaging, and you're not focusing on the fact that I'm watching something on my computer right now. You know, it's like I'm watching live theater.
Right.
It's like the experience, the emotion still connects, even though it's over a computer and not in an auditorium.
Thank you. I always try to look for silver linings in middle of a pandemic, and
please don't let this be the middle. Please don't let this be the middle.
Well, the ability to have you guys from different parts of the country and be able to come together and speak to something that you guys are passionate about and get us pumped and ready for the performance in June. We're excited. So I'm thankful for you guys. Join our podcast and let's spread the word of Improbable Players. So I'm excited. Thank you guys.
Thank you so much for having all of us.
Yeah, thank you.